Hello, and welcome to the COP26 Dialogues from the SDG Studio at UN headquarters in New York, where we feature a series of conversations on themes discussed at the UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow and how those themes connect to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Today is Cities, Regions, and Built Environment Day at COP26, where ministers, mayors, and urban experts and advocates are coming together to push for net zero emissions and long-term resilience and sustainability in cities. What commitments can we hope for from Glasgow? How do cities who have borne the brunt of the COVID-19 pandemic get back on track to meet the Paris Agreement for climate change? How do we build cities that are resilient to climate disasters? To answer these questions, joining me in the studio is Penny Abeywardena, New York City's Commissioner for International Affairs. And joining me live from Glasgow is Maimunah Mohammed Sharif, the Executive Director of the UN Human Settlements Program. Welcome to you both. But before we turn to our guests, who I can't wait to get into discussion with, two amazing women, let's take a listen to another powerful voice from Glasgow, the Mayor of Bogota, Colombia, Claudia Lopez, with a strong message to national governments and the private sector.
30 years of UN COPs meetings, global meetings, to take care of global warming. This one, the COP26, is the first one in which the local governments and the city governments of the world united came with a voice and leading by example with their city plan and climate actions plans. We were able, through organizations such as C40, which is a union of cities, to promote and to compromise others into climate change. It's the first time that we are able to show the pledge of 1,049 cities who already have climate action plans, climate action investments, are coming together to the COP26 to show that commitment, to show the commitment to change for our citizens and our cities, and to ask the national governments and the private corporations to do their part, to align their incentives and investments with our climate action plans, with our citizens' demand for actual change. We came together to tell the world that we are committed. We talk less, but we do more, because we have the demands of our citizens and the willingness to change to our citizens and the willingness to pay for change of our taxpayers.
What a powerful message from the Mayor of Bogota on the importance of cities, as we tackle this climate crisis and try to achieve the SDGs. To me, it's been clear that cities need to be a part of the solution. Since the beginning of the battle on climate change and the SDGs, cities can lead. First, I'm going to turn to you, Penny. What are cities putting on the table to solve the climate crisis, and what is the big message that cities have for world governments?
First of all, it is a pleasure to be here with you, Rob, and Maimunah in Glasgow. You know what cities are putting on the table? They're putting ambition. So cities have been on the forefront of climate change and many of the SDGs since the beginning. It's just now people are paying attention and recognizing that. I will say, from a very American perspective, New York City was the first city that committed ourselves directly to the Paris Climate Accord when our national government pulled out in 2017. We worked with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and we ended up having almost 400 cities, irrespective of political class, that understood the importance of climate change. Now, here in New York, and as around the world, the reason that cities have to be on the front lines is because we are impacted in our communities by climate change. I think many of the viewers are going to remember Superstorm Sandy. That's when New York City got hit by climate change in that way. And so what cities are putting out there is ambition. And there's a number of things we can talk about, and I want to hear what Maimunah is seeing in Glasgow, but we here in New York City not only have strong climate action, we also have quite a lot of investments in climate accountability. We have over the years worked with the Mayor of London to create the Divest Forum, and New York City has divested our pension funds, which is very significant, from fossil fuel companies and reinvesting it in clean energy. And I think these are the ways in which cities can take the experience that we have in our communities and show up from a policy perspective and show So, as the mayor from Bogota said, we might speak less, but we take big action. And I think that is what we are here in both Glasgow and New York City to tell world governments.
Yeah, thank you, Penny. And as a longtime resident of New York City, I thank you for your leadership with the mayor, to take real action on climate in the city that I call home and so many call home. So your leadership has been valuable and incredible as we go forward. But I'd like to turn to you now, Maimunah. You're there at the center of the action in Glasgow. You're seeing what's happening and listening to what the cities are telling the national governments. What are you hearing? What are the main messages you're hearing from the cities? And how does that relate to achieving the SDGs? And what are people getting excited about? What's happening there in Glasgow that we should be feeling good about at the city level?
Thank you very much, Rob, for having me and UN Habitat in this COP26 Dialogues. Yes, see, this morning I had the opportunity to join the Secretary General together with the 10 mayors in the discussion, and also listening to the mayors of Bogota. The lessons, I think the message will be given very loud and clear. Say that cities are the doers, not the delayers. And then is that the national government need to take actions to decarbonize cities before we can achieve the national NDCs. So they are talking about cities are not here to talk about target for mid-century. Cities are working together to deliver immediate actions and put the world on track to halve emission by 2030. I think this is also been mentioned by the mayor of Bogota and also from the C40, 1049, the cities are already on track implementing the climate action plans. I can feel the momentum of the cities in trying to impress, also to implement the ambitious and the equitable climate targets and plans. But access to finance, they also been discussed together with the Secretary General, and also and in many of the platforms that I attended. What they would like to see is the equitable climate target and plan. They have the plans, but they must have access to finance become a crucial determinants of the implementation. So meeting their shared climate goals will require accelerating the finance for climate implementation and also expanding the supply of climate finance available to cities. Then another message that I always hear from the cities today is that apart from the finance, is also call for the national government and donors to join hand together with the local government, not only in finance but also in the capacity. I think this is the areas that is a capacity, because cities cannot solve the crisis of the climate change alone, but many may not be equipped to take action. And now development versus the adaptation, development versus the infrastructure. So they need the multi-level governance framework for climate action, local capacities for a bankable project, not only bankable project, but bankable and green project. I think these are the two areas that I heard many times been brought up during the discussion. One is the capacity, one is finance, one is that they are really serious about the implementation of the climate action plan in line with the to achieve the 17 SDGs. So I stop there. I pass back to Europe.
No, great. Maimunah, if I could follow up. I mean, you've mentioned some of the challenges, the access to finance, the capacity, the real commitment to the change. What are the cities telling the national governments? What are they saying to their counterparts in national government to say, here's what we need and here's what we can do with it? What are they putting on the table to help with tackle this challenge?
Yeah, what they would like the national government to do on the finance is that they really would like to see there is a decision. The finance is there, but it's not really reached to the most vulnerable. So they really need a pro-poor approach for the finance, especially for the global south. If I might say that. So I think they would like the national government and donors to support the urban climate adaptation and resilience, including the concessional finance and grant. And they would like also to recognize that cities and their most vulnerable citizens, particularly in the global south, are already bearing the burden of the climate crisis, suffering from a disproportionate amount of economic and humanitarian costs. they also would like the national government and the development partners or the donors to capitalize on opportunities in cities. Cities is not only the source of problem; they also the creativity help and also opportunity in innovation to maximize the ambitions of the NDCs and the impact of the economic stimulus. I think they would like the government should integrate the urban climate action into the NDCs. I'm very happy to see that is from our analysis, Rob, that is the around 65% 6 years ago on the element of urban being mentioned in the NDCs and now increased to 84. But I think not enough with just mentioning or putting in the element of cities and urban content, urban climate action in the NDCs, but it's also in terms of the climate strategies and economic recovery packages. This is very important to enable the cities to strengthen their financial capacity and to access the finance directly through the more simplified means. I think this that that I mentioned earlier, the capacity of the cities is in terms of the officers, the technology, and the understanding. But now I think without finance going together with the capacity building, I think this will be putting especially the cities in the most vulnerable region, especially in Africa and in Asia, which is a two region which is very very fast in urbanized and the highest level of urbanization. I think this need to be really look forward and really be discussed. So they hope that the resolution by end of today or midnight today, at least by tomorrow, at least recognize the importance of the cities, because whatever the NDCs at the national level, they have to be trickled down to the local level, and the mayors and the governors at the local level and the people the community are the one who implement it and also been affected by the climate change. Pass back to you. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Maimunah. It's clear that cities have to be at the center of the plans as we take on these challenges, for sure. And that response is right on. I'd like to talk a little bit about a challenge that we've all faced over the last, 18, 20 months. It's hard to keep track of the time at this stage, with COVID-19, which really challenged cities, really challenged New York City as the epicenter back in March, April 2020. So Penny, how does a city like New York recover better, keeping its commitment to the SDGs, and development goals and the Paris Agreement for climate change? I mean, it was a struggle because we had to take on COVID as a crisis, and now we have to get back on these other paths. How is New York City going to do that?
I mean, so thank you for mentioning sort of what New York City went through. We were the epicenter last time, and in fact, the last time I was on UN campus was March 28th, 2020, when we received a historic donation from the UN of PPE. One thing I do want to, before I answer that question, what Maimunah said about our most vulnerable communities around the world, we also have that in developed cities, right? In New York City, it is not, we have 5 boroughs where there are significant racial and equity issues that we have to be tackling. And so one of the ways that the city has done that is we have funded over $1 billion worth of resiliency projects in Staten Island and Queens, recognizing the importance of focusing on our most underserved communities, especially from a sustainability resiliency perspective. So going back to 2015, the mayor launched One NYC. This stemmed from Superstorm Sandy. How are we going to develop New York City looking forward in a sustainable, resilient way, but with equity at the heart of our strategy? And so that has influenced our policies since then. And with COVID, what happened was, remember everybody thought COVID would be that thing where everybody would become equal? Nope. What we understood really quickly were the areas that were getting hit hardest were in our Black and brown communities, similar to where climate change is impacting our communities. And so one of the things that the mayor did was create, and I'm one of the founding members, a task force on racial justice, so that all the policies that we created during COVID, but also related to climate and other sectoral issues, have those vulnerable communities at the heart of it. And so that's why there are programs like the $100 billion around resiliency projects in Staten Island and Queens because of that committee. And I think that is something that Maimunah spoke to, and something we're seeing so much in Glasgow is hearing from these vulnerable communities. This is not just about those of us in power speaking, it's from the youth activists, and that's one of the ways that New York City has done it. We have a junior ambassador program. The majority of these young people choose climate because that's what they are, that's what they're experiencing in their community on a daily basis. My favorite is lots of students in the South Bronx focus on SDG 14, Life Underwater. And it's because they want to clean up the South Bronx River because it's one of the filthiest waterways in New York City. But you're seeing these types of activations in real ways that I think cities can do.
Oh, great. Thanks, Penny. And Maimunah, both you and Penny have really dug into this inequality issue and the fact that coming out of COVID, we're hoping we can recover better and do better on inequalities. And I'd just like to turn to you to speak a little bit further on what you're hearing from local governments and to Penny's reference there to the young people. I mean, the young people have been so present and their voice is so strong in Glasgow. Have you had a chance to interact with those young people and the groups they're representing to make sure that their voices are heard, and what's that been like?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I met many of the young people. They cannot remember my name, but they call me Edie. Then I look back, I met you here, I met you there. So I think that is, they said that is they would like their voice to be heard. And then they also mentioned that in UN Habitat and also in UN agencies, we work very closely with the young people, and I also share with them that now we are in the four intersecting crises in terms of a way forward. I also discussed with them during tea break and during the when I met them on the way to the venue. I told them that COVID-19 is one crisis, is health crisis. I think it's very, very important for us to look into how we can dominate the needs of many young people. I think now the today. Second is the financial and economic crisis. I shared with them this ignited by the COVID-19. They agreed with that because they felt that in terms of economic crisis, in terms of job creation, in terms of the way that the economics and what is their future, they ask us. Third is under social crisis. They also share with me that say that it's now locked down in the home. There are also people who are asked to be locked down, but there is no home. And asked to wash hand, but they have no even have water to drink. How can you ask them to wash their hand maybe frequently? So they shared their feelings. And of course the fourth is on the financial and of course the fourth is the climate crisis. Yes, the climate crisis. All these are interrelated.
I mean, we have seen that climate is the threat multiplier, right? And so that has to be the heart of the strategy. Even in COVID, we could not ignore that issue, right? It was almost just cities have had to do double duty, really.
Yeah. And Penny, to follow up on the engagement with young people that you referenced and Maimunah referenced, this is going to need a multi-sectoral approach.
Absolutely.
We've talked about the national governments and the city government relationships, the local governments. What about civil society, private sector, financial institutions? How is the city looking at that as it works to really finance, as Maimunah referenced, and just make things happen so that it's solutions that all those sectors need to see, that we need to drive toward that, and how's that working with the city?
And we all recognize that the barrier isn't the boldness or the ambition of the projects, but it's about the financing and how other sectors are going to support it. One thing I will say is the collaboration and the collectives that are related to cities working on this. We've talked about C40. There's obviously ICLEI and UCLG. But also, Maimunah and I both sit on the World Economic Forum's Cities of Tomorrow Council. And I will say, an institute like the World Economic Forum, which is, the private sector hub, for them to recognize the importance of cities, to make it a parallel that, is as important as any other sector, really shows the buy-in with the private sector on this work. I will say, and I don't feel like we're talking about it enough, but at the heart of this conversation is the Sustainable Development Goals. I just read the Secretary General's Common Agenda, the role of cities, and I think thanks to to the work of Maimunah and her team are really highlighted in that. And I think, what we have seen as New York City, we're host city, we had a unique opportunity. And back in 2015, when the SDGs were agreed to by the 193 member states, we took our One NYC agenda, new because it's so focused on sustainability and resiliency, but with that equity lens, that it would have synergies with the SDGs. We created a platform called Global Vision Urban Action, which created an opportunity for cities to use SDGs as a framework, as a common language to have these conversations. We launched the voluntary local review. We have almost, 350 local governments. Maimunah and I are so proud of the partnership of this, right? I mean, just since 2018, to have that many local governments, and I will say, what we have noticed is, one, the support of both member states and the private sector and civil society to this work of cities and local subnational governments focusing and highlighting how they're achieving the sustainable development goals. But at the heart of this, we've seen an increase during COVID. There is a need for connectivity, right? I mean, and that's been the powerful part about cities' involvement on climate, is that we're not trying to just achieve things in our own community. What we're actually trying to do is say, hey, this worked over here. Can you replicate this idea, and can we accelerate impact in your community because of this? And I think that's the kind of conversation that's happening right now that the private sector and civil society are very much engaged in.
Yeah, Penny, I have to say that voluntary local review that you started has engaged a lot of other sectors around doing their own voluntary reviews. We've been talking to universities around the world, and many of them are doing voluntary university reviews, as are members of the private sector, businesses coming in and doing voluntary reviews of their own activities and their own, networks and what they're working with, including within their supply chains.
Yes.
And Maimunah, apologies, we lost you there for a second, but you're back, and great to see you again. So as you probably heard Penny commenting on, we were talking about the multi-sectoral approach to attacking the climate crisis, but also taking on the SDGs, the entire agenda. And I'd be curious, I mean, you were talking about the engagement with the youth. I always think of the COPs as one of the most open kinds of UN events that take place, UN convenings that take place. And I know there's a lot of members of the business sector there. Obviously, civil society has been present. Are you seeing these sectors coming together and having a common vision? What's it sounding like there in Glasgow?
Yeah, in terms of this, the youth and the multi-sectors, I really hope that I can see more connection in the green zone. When I went to green zone, there's so many young people there talking, but not so much on the blue zone. So that is my personal observation. I think we need to bring the young people to the blue zone. The blue zone is mostly on the city leaders, the national leaders, the head of the government. I think they need to interact more at the blue zone. So hopefully that COP27 we can bring more young people, the young boys, into the COP27. So I think this is very, very important to have this. I always mention about the vertical and horizontal integration between the leaders at the global level, the regional level, at the local level, together with the horizontal, meaning that the private sector, the young people, the women with a disability. And also I joined the one program in the green zone about the indigenous society, looking at how they link climate change into the nature-based solution, climate change into the culture, into the values. I think this is to me is very important. We cannot put it aside. I think this is like the low-hanging fruits, and also instead of looking into the multi-million technology, I think the nature-based solution and the culturally and local technology and local values, local skill, I think need to be taken into account and bring together at all levels, not only at the national level, it's also at the local level and together with the UN agencies. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Maimunah. It's certainly going to take all of us. It's not just the governments, it's not just the UN, it's not even just the local governments. It's going to take all sectors to take this on for sure. We're coming to the end of our time here. It's been a great conversation with both of you, but before we go, I'd like to ask each of you one final question. Thinking forward a little bit, not that far, but coming out of Glasgow, if there's one thing that you would advise people to do, or that you're going to do either yourself or with your organization, what would it be? What's the one thing that we need to know coming out of Glasgow as we step into the actions that we've all been talking about are so important as we go forward? So first, I'll go to you, Maimunah, in Glasgow.
Yeah, one thing for me is that we have to put policy to action, action to implementation. But what I want to do is that next Monday, I will have our executive board at UN Habitat. I will report the outcomes of the COP26 to the UN Habitat Executive Board, and then we would like to see to discuss the way forward, what we at organization in Habitat and maybe also in other agencies can do. I think this is very important for us to formulate the how. I think we already have so many plans and so many strategies, but I think now we have to formulate the how, but we cannot formulate it alone, but we have to go to do it together. Second is I would like to bring the COP26 to the General Assembly special high-level meeting in New York on the 28th of April. I think this is very, very important. We should bring it to continue, and also to bring to every cities. There will be every city 17 to 21st of May in Kisumu, in Nairobi. And last but not least, to bring this to all the way to World Urban Forum in Abu Dhabi, in Katowice on June 2022. I think this we should continue bringing the message. At the same time, not only talk, but I think we need to look for the action plan and the timeline and the roadmap. That is what me as personally and also my organization would like to do. Thank you so much. Over to you, Rob.
Great, thank you, Maimunah. You're taking a message to everyone, everywhere, it sounds like, and making action happen at all levels across the board, vertically and horizontally. I love that. Penny, your last word. What should we do?
I'm going to say ditto to everything Maimunah said, because that is actually a very strategic plan to engage, subnational governments, but the different sectors that we need in this conversation. I think, I have been having a lot of conversations with young people who are frustrated, who just don't feel like us grown-ups are doing what we should be doing, what we're responsible for. And I find the hard conversations that we all need to have is to find opportunity and hope. We are living in a crisis and in an emergency, but there is nothing worse than feeling like you can't do anything. And we really have to, as institutions, as city government, as the United Nations, as leaders on this issue, is really talk to the young people about finding opportunities to act and make change where and how they can. And I think that continuous work is something that we have to continue to do on climate.
Yeah, bringing in the young people. It's their world, and I think that's a great note to end on, making sure that we're doing what we should be doing. Maimunah, Penny, thank you so much for joining us at the COP26 Dialogues today. Thanks to everyone who's viewed this and joined us as well. And let's take action. Let's make it all happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.